We have Anne Laure Jackson as ever. Anne Laure Jackson, hello.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening.
And if you're listening to this, I would definitely urge you to go later and watch the video because you've got some of your background back, some awesome things.
Yes, I went to the removals company that moved all my stuff out waiting for my clinic to be built and said, look, I really miss my climbing wall. Can I have my climbing wall? And they brought my slide, they brought everything with them. And I thought, oh, no, that's just going to be too much having the slide in the background as well as the climbing wall and the ladder to be able to get up and down. So, I'm back. It's lovely to have my stuff around me. It's a funny thing. Yeah, it's a lovely thing. My parents literally are moving out this week. So massive removals and hopefully fully established in our household by the end of this week. But I totally get their downsizing. They're having to, it's a massive sensory overloading experience for them, but they're managing it. But for me, I've been able to bring things back in. So it's just nice. A little bit more homely in my office here.
Well, let's start there then. Your parents' sensory overload, they're moving from a bigger to a smaller house, so we can understand that part of it all. That makes sense, I guess. But the sensory overload, how do you begin to process? I mean, if you've been there for 50 years or a year, you've got memories. So how would you best prepare somebody? Have you prepared your parents for moving house, which is a huge issue, and it's sensory, just there's so much.
Oh, so much, so much. I think partly is that as long as it's kind of the preparation that this is going to be really hard. This is possibly one of the biggest things that to downsize when all of your life you're geared towards. If you're married and have family, it's all about family. It's all about making that nurturing environment. It's all about the memories and making memories together and doing things, and you collect things and you make things, and the house is full, and then your children, leave the nest, and that's fine, but you're still typically in the family home at that point. And then all of a sudden there comes a point years later when actually the family home has a different nuance, it has a different meaning, and the realization that you are changing, everything is changing psychologically, it is huge. So I just think anybody out there who is, if you're moving or downsizing at the minute, it's a very different experience to upsizing for sure. But one of the things that happened is that within the last couple of months, while this transition's been happening, my parents have joined the same gym that I go to. Because I was telling them we need proprioceptive input, come and do the sauna. So it's like, yes, so not that we've ever been in the sauna together, but my little kind of like, we need to get those muscles, we need to de-stress, we need to find different ways of using those sensory strategies to help, because of the overload from all areas, emotionally, like sensory wise. The place is a mess. The visual clutter is really hard. And in their new place here, not everything's found its place yet, and that's also really hard. That's really stressful. So trying to organize as much as possible, keep certain things in a certain place in a room. It's like anybody who's moving house, try and have one space where there is some degree of organization, some degree of visual organization. Auditory, you can have music that you like to listen to. There are spaces for you to move in that you are comfortable with, and seats that you're used to sitting in. Even their furniture is all completely new because they've had to downsize the furniture. So every single experience, apart from their mugs, yay, they've got their mugs, they've got new cookers and new everything else. But yes, they have their own mugs that they brought with them, and it's like, yes, keep those things that you can. Because there's an awful lot of adaptation. Even the bed, so what you sleep on, how you're used to your body position being, the pressure, the firmness of the mattress, all of that is just different. And it's like, it's a lot for the brain to cope with all the change all in one.
And then on top of all that, you've got dust, which is going to be another issue. If you're going to struggle with that, it can make it harder to breathe. So now your body's not just under a mental, emotional strain, physical strain, because it's quite hard work, whatever level of involvement you have, but you've got dust involved, and you've got all the extra stuff and exercises, muscles you've never used. So now there's an additional level of strain, which you've got to factor in order to try and process it as best you can without biting people's heads off.
Yes. Absolutely. Because that's always the outcome, isn't it? It's just we always end up impacting other people if we're not in a good place. For me, it's a sensory healthy place. For others, it's like that emotional, that physical. It always has an impact on others, and we are part of community. We are part of family. We are part of an organization. We are part of a work or school structure, and yeah, we want to reduce the ability to upset others as much as possible by us taking control of what we can take control of, and just try and find peace with the things that we can't.
Yes, finding pieces of what you can't sort out is a good thing. We have moved many more times than anybody ever probably healthily should. Just life stuff that
Right,
happens. And some of the things we've definitely picked up is the organization beforehand. Do as
right,
much as you physically can before moving day. So that when moving day happens, you've got the most done possible to try and
yeah,
get your energy reserves and have a rest before day, day of moving. And it's those things, isn't it? Like you were saying, it's preparing and doing what you can. You can't control someone dropping a TV or pushing over the coffee onto the brand new pristine carpet. We can't control these things, but there are many things we can control by preparing. So when those bad things happen, hopefully we're less aggravated because we're calmer before they start to build upon us.
absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
Difficult times. Very much so. But hey, working out in the gym is great because you're getting used to being with each other again. I mean, that's another dynamic, which is you've gone from daughter of to now, this is my home, this is our home, we're sharing this space, and it's, there's all those as well.
Yeah, yeah, it is, and like, thankfully, remarkably, it's like we've been having a couple of months of transition. And it's just like this is lovely. So as long as we keep talking, everything that comes, I'm a big communicator anyway, and I think anything can be solved by communication, by good communication. So mm. Even bad
Cool.
communication, I've heard that. It's interesting. Even bad communication is better than no communication. So I think
Yeah.
that's one to debate. That's not my area, so maybe we that's for another time. but but yeah, no. Thankfully, my parents, they brought me up, I suppose, to be good communicators. They've set the example, so it's much easier for us now to communicate well and make sure that all those things that niggle, we just don't like niggles in our lives, do we? Really? So we don't have niggles in the household, or if we do, we get them sorted as soon as we can.
Which is good because it's removing that load. Because
Yeah.
I mean, moving house, you've got all these extra pressures, and all of a sudden, people erupt. But no one ever erupts randomly. There's always a process and a journey, whether it's sensory overload because there's too much noise or not enough noise, too much movement, too little. There's never that point of breaking, if you like, bad phrase, but that point, it's never isolated. There's always a journey towards that, and what we can do to break up the journey, that could be the difference between don't worry about it and losing the plot.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's one of the biggest things in what we try and do to try and get as many of those sensory healthy experiences in during the day, because we do go up. Life happens, things happen, and it's just like let's nip it in the bud before it starts to escalate, because then there will be yeah, we would call it a meltdown. Others, it would just be just a losing the plot, and all the rest of it. It's like, well, we feel it, let's deal with it. Don't let it build up. It affects so many different areas. The same principles of good self-management, emotionally, physically. If you feel a niggle in your body, you don't push it. You just like let's pull back until we feel as though it's healed, and then we can press forward if we're feeling a bit sore in areas, or otherwise it's just like, no, let it heal a bit and then go. And it's just like we need to apply those principles across the board in all areas of life, and especially sensory, because because it's so strong, affects our behavior so strongly.
If I had a psychologist specialist, I'd ask them this one. But I was thinking about kind of the bad communication. I'm thinking about someone with let's just a fairly straightforward, even from my little mind. They have an issue with audio processing. So any loud noise, it's not just a bit discomforting. It's really shocking because what we think of as a bit loud is incredibly loud. So they're going to react to that.
Mm.
So how can we sort of minimize those processes to sort of get those stresses down? Because one of the things that I'm thinking about moving days, you're trying to manage lots of people. You've got boxes coming in, you've got boxes going out, you've got children to care for, you've got to think about food. How can we best process someone who's got difficulty sort of processing everything? How do we help them best especially on something like moving day where everything is so heightened and it's so easy to forget about the person that's maybe quieter but struggles more.
Yeah, yeah, and often it's the quiet ones. It's a shame we often don't recognise the quiet ones and how they struggle internally until a few years later you get the breakdown or you get a real sickness or something. So if you have got a quiet one, make sure that there are opportunities when you have space aside to just gently ask how things are going or play a game with them or just talk. But anyway, yeah, that's for dealing with quieter ones that are not so obviously explosive. Um, but on certainly on the day itself, for lots of my families, it's like we just need to, because it is that disruptive, just remove the person completely from moving day. See if there's another member of the family somewhere else that can take them. Because it's so disruptive, so disorganizing, really hard for people to get their heads around. That for some, it really is the best to say you're going on holiday, or you create a totally different thing because everything that they knew that was familiar, that was comfortable, that they could settle, that they would be relaxed, their arousal levels would be nice in a lovely place. All of everything they've ever associated with that place is upside down and is turned upside down. So yeah, remove them where you can. And then if not, I do love photos. I really love photos for going around, and especially where we're such a visual society these days, taking videos of the new place that you're going to move to, taking videos of rooms, if it's helpful, before they actually go in and see a room that is empty. Maybe it's their bedroom that's been their solace, been their place for years. You can take a picture of what it is before they actually go in and experience it, because the physical experience of walking into a room that is so different to what they are used to, what have been used to for years, is really disruptive. So it's kind of, but if you show them a picture, they can either choose if they want to go back into their bedroom just to check everything's gone, or actually no, that they've seen it, it's enough. They can close that door literally, and then move in. But yeah, so there's lots to consider, isn't there, really, for moving?
Yeah, I was thinking that the photo is kind of two-dimensional. It might be a three-dimensional picture, but it's something you can physically hold in your hand. But then you don't have all the smells which you might associate, even mild ones. I mean, smells are so evocative to our brains, as we've discussed before. But it's sort of desensitizing just a little bit to try and ease that process out of one place into something else.
Yeah, yeah, and that's what's huge, and that's been really interesting. One of it's the smells actually with my parents moving in. That has been one of the biggest things that I didn't expect. Um, that actually I didn't realise that they have their they have their smell, and we all have our smell. And I know obviously, like when if you're a parent, you know your children's smell, and they probably know, you know, your children probably know your parents' smell. And but I wasn't as aware of my parents' side of it, because it's just like I don't know. I suppose it is. It's their house, and of course it's not their house. It's actually they're in my house now, but they still have their smell, which is impacting our house because. And it's like, oh, which is fine again, but it's just a difference that you just need to get used to and recognize. Okay, yeah, this is different.
You just transported me to my grandparents' house in Manchester because there was a lovely smell in their house and it was different.
Mm.
And I was just taken back. They had this plastic. Remember these? It's like a carpet, and then you had a plastic carpet on top of the carpet, so you wouldn't touch the actual carpet. And it was like this clattering noise as you walked along. And I was just transported immediately, remembering a smell, to walking along that plastic thing, the noise it made, and the smell of the house, because there was always good food in there. And you just transported me to a very happy place. Just talking about your parents and I'm sure a good smell. Just to be clear.
Yes, yes. But it's funny, I was thinking about those little plastic things that go over the carpet the other week. It's bizarre how things set you off. But yeah, that was something that happened to my parents. And I thought, oh wow, I remember those.
Yeah.
It's
No, I
horrible
yeah.
things.
It was a definite noise of entering my Actually, both of my grandparents had the same thing, and it was just one of those things. It was the noise of my grandparents, you know. Right, I've got a question list here, which is great from Ariel for you, which is brilliant. So please send your questions in to us, but we've got some other questions we can work through as well over time. So if you've got any questions for Anne, we're not reached the end yet, don't fear. If you've got any questions for Anne, email them to us here in the studio. Anything to do with sensory health. You've heard us talking about moving house. Maybe you've got a specific question about that. That's great. We love questions. But hello at pure247radio.org. Hello at pure247radio.org. But here's a question for you. Can you explain what sensory processing disorder is and how it differs from sensory processing issues?
Oh, okay,
That's not my question because
cool.
that's very clever.
It's very clever. Yes. So, sensory processing disorder. Now, we have to start there because it isn't in the diagnostic manual. The things that pediatricians, the things that clinicians use to diagnose people, it's not in that manual. Sensory processing disorder will not be found in there. So it's a very strange one to begin with. We've called it SPD for years, whether that be sensory processing disorder, sensory processing differences, sensory processing dysfunction. It's been used in lots of ways over the past because it's something as therapists, as occupational therapists, that we have seen for years. And it became 20, 30, 40, or crumbs, maybe even more than that now, something that we saw all the time. Sensory processing issues are what we saw all the time. And very much the language of that time was ASD, autistic spectrum disorder. A lot of these disorders were coming through. So it just was natural for it to become sensory processing disorder. That we called it within the within our frame of reference, as they say, because it was stuff that we saw all the time. So actually, those sensory processing issues that you're talking about are the same as a sensory processing disorder, but we probably shouldn't use the term sensory processing disorder because personally I don't think it's a disorder. I think it really does impact life. It's really not helpful for most people. It can have great assets for some too, though. So that's why I just don't like the word disorder. But they are the same thing. We've got sensory processing issues, which cannot be diagnosed as a sensory processing disorder, but some people recognize they get in the way of life. Therefore, they are classed as a disorder or a difference. And that's where the D of the sensory processing, SPD, can be explained and can be covered. What it actually is huge with our main areas of being overstimulated and feel utterly bombarded or not registering sensation. So we just miss out so much in the environment, or we avoid so much in the environment because it's so overwhelming. Or, the picking out of the detail in things just totally gets in the way, that we miss signs when we're driving. We might miss signs if we're walking around. We miss verbal cues. We miss things around the household. We misunderstand conversations. There's all those discrimination aspects of things that are really hard to cope with. And then we have the clumsiness, we have the uncoordination. We've got people who can't yet still do zips and buttons, laces, and they're walking to doorways. They're walking into other things. They don't feel pain in the same way. So there's loads of different aspects of sensory processing issues. But I think I will probably always land on sensory processing issues rather than a sensory processing disorder, even though I do recognize it can massively impact life and can really, impede people's functioning, physical functioning, social functioning, emotional functioning on so many levels. But I think these days most people don't like things to be called a disorder. I don't know. That'd be interesting. If anyone has any comments, if you have a comment, if you have a thought on that, whether it should be called a disorder, or whether it's helpful for it to be called a disorder for you, that would be interesting.
I guess there's helping clarity when we define something. We all like to put things in boxes, don't we? You are an
Mm.
occupational therapist. Okay, I know what I think that means and all the rest of it. But I was thinking about a guy, Neil Anderson, who's from the States, and he was talking about how we describe people, what labels we give to somebody, and why we need to be very careful. And one of the things he said was, if someone burps, we don't immediately say, they're a burper. We wouldn't do that. We're just taking one thing, and it
Mm.
doesn't make it the definition of all of them. Because when we say, well, that person burps, therefore they are a burper, now
Yes.
we've defined them as someone who burps. And that could be, it's inaccurate for a start because it's only one facet, one part of who they are.
Mm.
It's one physical outcome. So I guess that's where I would kind of sit, because I liked his approach to looking at why we need to be so careful when we say you have a disorder. Because the problem with that is, yes, it's very clear and very defined. However, for that person now, it's like, I've got a disorder. So where do I go from there? It's quite hard, isn't it? I suppose it's almost like a harsh diagnosis is how I would sort of hear that word.
Right. Yeah. That's how I hear it too. And it's just like, I know that it is really impactful. It's really hard for people when they can't wear clothes that they want, when they can't go out in the social environment, when they can't do this, when they've got children just licking everything and chewing on everything at home. It is hard. It's how we can not diminish how hard life can be with these issues, without labeling or using language that's not helpful ultimately. Mm.
I mean, language clearly helps. I remember being at school. People might have their thoughts on this one, but my little son was really struggling because he said to me, "Daddy, that child was—he was only about 4. Okay, so he's a 4-year-old. That child was naughty, but the teacher wouldn't tell them off." So when I said to the teacher, "Look, my son's just said this. I'm just feeding it back because he's in school, and it's in a classroom. He's just said that child's naughty. Oh, we never use the word naughty." I said, "That's great, but my child's just said they're naughty. That's what we're talking about. Oh, we never use the word naughty." It's like, okay, you're getting stuck into something. Let's deal with what he said,
Right.
not specific wording. Because I said, "Well, what do you use?" "Oh, well, it's not good behavior." "All right, so that's bad behavior." "Oh, we never do. That's negative." And I was trying to have a conversation. Yes, but people need to know what's good and what's bad. And if it's not good, then it's
Mm.
bad. "Oh, we would never say that." So yes, but that's really unhelpful to my 4-year-old, who Peter still has a very black and white perspective on right and wrong. If it's not
Right.
right, it's wrong. If it's not wrong, it's right. It's really simple. He's 13. He's maintained that. If he ever goes into the police, he'll be brilliant. Order and
There are
justice.
so many. I said there was something also about those teen years, those early teen years. I just think they really all need to go into law. That justice, we need you as judges. We really do. I like the number of, especially I think that age, and it's really strong. And actually, you just think, oh, we just need people who will stand ground and see it as you see it. I think over
Mm.
time things do, yes, there's more to be considered, but I think ultimately those kind of characteristics can be phenomenally helpful,
Yeah,
and we need more people who will stand for, yeah, saying what is what, and what is good
yeah.
and what is bad and what is right and what is wrong, and then mm,
I brought that example up only because I wasn't trying to get a contentious discussion about the word naughty, but it was at some level we need to define things, don't we? So for my son, it's like, well, that's bad behavior. He's been naughty, so why hasn't he been made to say sorry? For him, it was a very simple definition of something. 4-year-old simplicity. I'm really glad he's not lost that simplicity. But I guess I'm sort of working through your answer. But when it comes to disorder, it's quite a judgment, isn't it? It's sort of all encompassing. I have a disorder, but I mean that's where that burper thing comes from. Because
yes,
well, not everything to do with that person is disordered, and to them, it probably is not disordered. So actually, that diagnosis, for want of a better way of thinking about it, is not necessarily helpful for them. Does that make
yeah,
sense?
yeah, and also actually just thinking on what you were saying there about the naughty thing, the opposite side of that, and what I have difficulties with some of the teachers that are saying, oh, they're being naughty. I have to come around from the other side and actually say, well, actually they have sensory processing issues. So it's not a character, it's not a heart issue. So one of the things that I look at is it sensory? Is it behavior? Because they haven't slept, they haven't eaten, they've got some emotional needs that need met, or is it a heart issue? Is it a character issue? Are they being naughty? So I do call it for what it is personally, but it's the sense of what is the root of the behavior coming from? Because actually someone who appears to be naughty might just be really struggling because of the overwhelm, because somebody's just come up behind them and touched them and they've gone on alert and they're really acting out because their tactile system has been stimulated. So I do a lot of work trying to help people see things through a different set of eyes, because it could be that they are being naughty because of a heart issue. It could be that they have a behavior issue because of those things I've mentioned before, because of lack of sleep, because of whatever, and they don't have the resources to be able to manage their behavior well, which is different from the more disobedient, the more kind of like rebellious type of things. Or is it because literally their tactile system has just been stimulated and set on alert in a way that they weren't prepared for, and have resulted in looking like they're being naughty? So, not taking away any of your family experiences or anybody else's experiences of just really thinking that, like, yeah, they're just being naughty. But there are times that we do need to step back and double check our how we've interpreted something. Mm.
And I guess it's also that thing of not assassinating someone's character and saying, right, you are naughty. Actually, a better thing was, oh, there seems to be some some behavior that could be naughty. Let's investigate this further, rather
Yeah,
than you have a disorder. Oh, there
yeah,
are some issues here which you seem to be struggling with. And actually, you're then not assassinating the person,
mm,
judging them into a box where do they go? Actually, they have some recourse to come back. I mean, even if it's a 4-year-old, they can still communicate in some way. But you have a disorder.
yeah,
Where do you go from there? I
yeah,
suppose
yeah.
that's me thinking out your response.
Yeah, I know, because there's always like with anything, there's always like so many different interpretations of what and seeing things and how we expand conversations. But yeah, that was a well, again, it's our judgment. That was a naughty thing to do. But if you can't judge, it's that balance between how can you judge with saying something, describing something, because we're like as Christians we're taught not to judge, but it's just like actually there is an element of being able to recognize something for what it is and calling it for what it is. And how do we do that in a non-judgmental way? We use terms that describe what things are. That's another discussion to be going down. How do you judge without judging?
Yeah, no, that's good. I remember one time on a scout camp, I hit accidentally somebody on the head with a big pole, and he was a really soft character, and he completely flipped out, and it took a few adults to restrain him because he wanted to really do me harm. And then he kind of recovered again. And it was basically it was a brain injury one way or another, because I accidentally bashed him on the head with a pole.
Right.
So he's then got a physical reaction. Now he was a bit thrown out of it. I was a bit shocked because I was only about 12 or 13.
Yeah.
He was fine after that, but that it's just going to show. It's an example of my own sort of past of sometimes we do something to somebody and their reaction. He wasn't being naughty. He wasn't being evil. He wasn't being bad. He was physically responding to something that was beyond his ability to control effectively
Absolutely.
because I banged his head and he had a bruise. And, so, and that's what we're talking about all the time. That's an extreme example, but it's perhaps not so obviously as extreme as some of the people that you work with because, people say, oh, what have you got a disability sticker for to somebody because they haven't got a wheelchair? Well, perhaps today's a good day. And actually that is a bad judging. It's a bad judgment, but we need to
That
ask questions, don't we?
Yeah, 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 we do. And that whole bad day, good day thing is really hard and really hard for people to see, really hard for people to get their heads around. And in
Mm.
schools, it's just like, well, they could do it yesterday, and it's just like, well, yes, they could do it yesterday, but it's like today there's a real traffic jam in the brain. It's just like that there are things not going through. There's not good connections happening in the brain today, or so much was used yesterday, or so many. There's just a whole load of clogging up in the pipes, in the neural networks, in everything that came from yesterday. It was a good day because they were successful because of the day before had been a good day when they've been able to get things, nice sensory diet, lovely sensory experiences, emotionally, lots of things were happening well, so that there was a clear roots, clear neural pathways around the brain and the body for things to connect. And then the next day is just a real clog jam of stuff, and the connections are just not going where they are. And the success, people can't write one day and they could the other day. People can't talk in the same way that they could before, can't express themselves, can't hold it together, just really moody. Yeah.
But we all have bad days. We understand that. But again, it's coming to that. Why do you need a wheelchair sticker if you've not got a wheelchair, disability sticker, And well,
Mm.
yesterday I needed it tomorrow probably, but today I'm able to walk. Hey, it's great. And
Yeah.
it's almost, I think when we have this, you have a disorder, we kind of, we're not really allowing people to develop or to grow or to have a good day because then the other thing we're saying with the disorder, this has got me going now. The other thing about disorder is it's kind of limiting what they're allowed to do. You have disorder,
Mm.
but what's a disorder for us to see at somebody else is perfectly fine to them. And how do we then define what's average? 2.4 children was a thing that went around, which was absurd. You cannot have an average of 2.4 children. It doesn't work. And yet we banned this phrase around years ago. The
Yeah.
average family is 2.4 children. No, it's not. It's 2 or 3. You can't have 2.4. And yes, mathematically, but
Mhm.
people are more than just statistics. They're more than data. We are people. We breathe. We feel. And so, yeah, I think it's that thing of not judging, but making judgments that are sound, wise, and righteous. And that's
Yes.
where someone like you comes in.
Oh, thank you. That was a lovely lead.
Well, I do
Very
try.
honouring. Thank you very much. But it was, what was I going to say? Oh no, sorry, it has completely gone. I was going to say something really good, and then I was totally taken aback by just the excellent phrase in which you put at the end of your statement there. But I think it's about identity as well. Yes, identity, that it's very easy for people to hold on to that as that is their identity, that it is bigger than the thing itself, and it becomes who they are.
Mm.
And it's just like, let's not identify with that stuff. We may have difficulties, or there may be issues, or there may be certain biases, there may be this, that, and the other, but it does not define who you are. And that's what we really have to be careful of. If people find that definition in who they are in those labels, it's like,
Reminds me, actually, before we move on, of a family. One child very, very clearly on a spectrum. I've forgotten now if it's ADHD or autism. It's over a decade ago, but very, very extreme end of that, whichever one it was. The other two siblings had no problems, and yet they would copy the older child who had these particular symptoms because he got lots of sympathy, as they would see it. We get lots of attention. He does this, therefore, if I do that, I'll get the same attention.
yeah,
One of the struggles we had, though, was the mum used this to try and get more stuff from people because, well, I've got a child with, and it's like, yes, you have, but you've also got two children who don't. And actually, you can't sort of go through life forcing a problem that you have to deal with and say, this is us, because it's a part of you, but it doesn't define all of you. And that, again, I think is where the idea of a disorder comes from, because ultimately, I have a disorder. Well, yeah, we've all got a disorder. We're all terminally ill. I mean, it's a reality. But whereabouts on the scale of life are we? And if we start putting
mm,
people too much into a box, how do they break out? Or even we sort of encourage them to not live life to the full, which is what you try and do as an OT, because then
yeah.
it's like, well, I've got a disorder. What can I do? Well, lots actually.
I have to say, we have our once a month we have our prayer meeting for Christian sensory support and Santé generally as an organisation, and it just came out of one of our prayers' mouths of praying into sensory freedom. And I
Mm.
thought, I'd not considered that. I've never put those two together before. And then one of the other members was commenting that, yeah, because sometimes it can feel as though you're in a prison, but what you do is help people find that freedom in who they are. And it's providing that sensory freedom. And I thought, oh, what a lovely thing. And I'm still going to meditate on it more, because that was only just on Sunday night, but just to consider what that means and how to help folk feel that and sense it and live in that sensory freedom, which is an even higher level than sensory health, really. So, but it was a lovely thing.
I've just written that down because that's brilliant. I love that.
Mm.
Sensory freedom. Okay, thank you, Anne. This took a detour which I didn't expect, which I love, which is fantastic. Yeah, I was reading the question out thinking, I don't even understand the question, but I understand the question now. I wonder what your thoughts are, dear listener, about do we label something as somebody who has a disorder, or is there a better way of wording that? You can let us know that if you want to. Any questions you've got for Anne, you can do that as well. Email once again, hello@pure247radio.org, hello@pure247radio.org. Any issues in the news, any questions about sensory health, any queries, wonderings, you can pose them to Anne. What was I going to say next? Do you know, my brain is just, it's not working
I think they
today.
should go to your website to find out more,
Thank
don't
you.
you?
That was it. I knew there was something. So if you want to know more about Anne, how you can connect with her and access her amazing services, you can go to our website, pure247radio.org, pure247radio.org/ALJ. Thank you, Anne.
Perfect. Thank you.